Is the US-Saudi nuclear deal on or off? The United States and Saudi Arabia signed a nuclear cooperation agreement on Wednesday, under which US companies would develop the kingdom's nuclear infrastructure for civilian energy purposes. And as far as nuclear deals go, it seems like quite a good one for Saudi Arabia. It could potentially allow the country to enrich uranium on its own soil, and the program is subject to checks based on bilateral safeguard agreements with the US rather than the International Atomic Energy Agency. None of that was the case for the UAE or Turkey's agreements, which follow the 1-2-3 formula that the US demands of all of its nuclear partners. And that's not the only surprise. For years, Saudi access to nuclear power was tied to a larger deal in which it would normalize ties with Israel. Yet this agreement was signed with no mention of Israel. Predictably, the announcement faced extensive backlash from members of US Congress and allies such as Israel, the only Middle Eastern state with a nuclear program. So Donald Trump backtracked, saying on Truth Social that the agreement was totally subject to Saudi Arabia normalizing ties with Israel. His statement blindsided Saudi officials, who had spoken with top US diplomats just hours earlier. Yet the White House doubled down.
He has said if they don't join the Abraham Accords, the deal is off.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu followed suit, tweeting that Saudi Arabia's joining of the Abraham Accords would be a historic leap forward for peace in the Middle East. For now, it's unclear whether Trump is trying to manage the backlash or change the agreement in real time, or whether Saudi Arabia secretly agreed to those terms. But one Saudi source was quoted as saying, "The deal was signed, so nothing to renegotiate. Tweets don't overturn signed agreements." Now, it's no secret that Saudi Arabia has wanted a nuclear program for decades. Yet talks have stalled over its demand to enrich uranium on its own soil. The US has traditionally denied this request, worried that Saudi would choose to secretly enrich uranium to weapons level, as North Korea did. And it has good reason. It was America that helped start Iran's nuclear program under the Shah's rule back in the 1950s, not foreseeing that if he was ousted from power, the program would fall into the hands of the Islamic Republic. And Saudi Arabia's own statements have done little to reassure them. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, has long said that if Iran developed a nuclear bomb, Saudi Arabia would do the same. Despite those concerns, by late 2023, the two seemed close to a deal that would trade nuclear power for normalization with Israel. But then, the 7th of October attacks and the outbreak of the Gaza war quickly ruled out the possibility. Then came Trump's second term, alongside a flourishing bromance between the two, with Saudi Arabia marking the president's first foreign visit. But this wasn't just about personality or oil. Saudi Arabia's vast reserves of minerals and rare earths made it a vital partner for reducing US dependence on China and developing its AI industry. Since Trump retook office last year, the two countries have announced a flurry of investments and partnerships in strategic economic areas. Several members of Trump's orbit also have business ties with Saudi Arabia, most notably the $2 billion the kingdom invested in Special Envoy Jared Kushner's firm shortly after the end of Trump's first term. And so, the Crown Prince gained greater influence over US foreign policy, persuading Trump to lift sanctions on Syria's new government in May of last year and gaining access to F-35 fighter jets that November, which only Israel possessed at the time. Yet as Israel took its military campaign across the region, striking Iran in June of last year and targeting Hamas's leadership in Qatar that September, Saudi Arabia grew increasingly distrustful of America's ability to keep regional stability. Shortly after the Doha strike, the kingdom announced a defense pact with nuclear-armed Pakistan, signaling its dissatisfaction with the US. But the worst was yet to come. Once the US and Israel launched their joint war on Iran, Saudi Arabia faced not just the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, but attacks from Iran, Iraqi militias, and most recently, Yemen's Houthis. And rather than firmly coming to its defense, Trump seemed to prioritize his own goals, escalating his rhetoric despite Iran's threats of region-wide retaliation, and then downplaying Iran's aggression in the Gulf when trying to pursue a deal. The relationship reached a low in early May, when the US's plan to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz under Operation Project Freedom was halted after just a day, because Saudi Arabia denied the US access to airspace and bases on its territory, fearing that the US would not protect it from Iranian retaliation. Instead of entering open military action with the US, Saudi looked for security elsewhere, joining a diplomatic forum with Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, working to end its feud with the UAE, and signing a defense agreement with Ukraine. But even if the US isn't the most reliable, its technology definitely is. That's why the two countries agreed on another $2 billion worth of weapon sales this month. It's also why Saudi Arabia has entered a 30-year-long, multi-billion-dollar deal that attempts to commit the US more firmly to the region in the long term. So, what's in it for Washington? First, American companies get to muscle out foreign competitors to build Saudi's nuclear infrastructure, making the kingdom more dependent on US technology and expertise. This isn't just a windfall for US business. It's also reassurance that Saudi Arabia won't draw closer to China or Russia for help instead, something the kingdom has long threatened to do. Second, the development of nuclear power for energy frees up more oil for export. Third, it keeps Saudi Arabia and its vast mineral deposits firmly in the US camp against its enemies. And lastly, it tries to compensate for the insecurity caused by Iran's emboldenment and help the kingdom accept any deal that reflects that reality. The US drive to mend fences with regional allies burned by the Iran war has spurred several such deals, including the agreement to sell Turkey F-35 fighter jets, selling Qatar $4 billion worth of arms, and granting the UAE special access to sensitive technology. But it's unclear whether these steps could improve overall security or spark an escalating arms race in a divided region. For example, Saudi access to nuclear power could push Iran to harden its demands for its own nuclear deal and encourage Turkey and the UAE to renegotiate theirs, which the UAE is entitled to do in the text of its agreement. Amid all of this, one key question remains unanswered. What did Saudi Arabia offer in return? Will it join future operations in Iran or the Strait of Hormuz? Or is a normalization framework slowly and quietly underway?